The standoff in the Strait of Hormuz intensifies, and the UN is calling for help for thousands of stranded seafarers. The European foreign ministers call Israel's actions in Lebanon totally unacceptable. Entire villages have been destroyed. With a truce between the US and Iran set to expire, time is running out to get them to the negotiating table in Islamabad. It is still unclear whether talks are going to take place. Speaking to US media a short while ago, President Donald Trump said he does not want the ceasefire with Iran to be extended. He instead suggested US forces are ready to go militarily if an agreement is not reached. Trump says the US is in a strong negotiating position and will end up with a great deal.
We don't have that much time because by the time both parties get there, as you know, they just got the okay to go forward, which I knew they were going to do anyway. I mean, I don't think they had a choice. They have to negotiate. And, you know, the one thing I'll say is this: Iran can get themselves on a very good footing if they make a deal. They can make themselves into a strong nation again. But they have to use reason, and they have to use common sense, and they can get themselves into a great position to make themselves into a great country, but a legitimate country, not a country based on death and horror.
Well, the U.S. has not yet sent its delegation, led by Vice President J.D. Vance, to Pakistan. The Iranians say they will not negotiate under threat. Iranian media reports say no representatives, including any expert or technical delegations, have gone to Islamabad. Tehran's chief negotiator says Iran is ready to reveal new cards on the battlefield. And Pakistan is mediating the talks. It's urging the US and Iran to extend the ceasefire. Islamabad is still trying to get both sides onto the table. Pakistani diplomatic officials have told Al Jazeera there is still a chance for a second round of direct talks on Wednesday. Well, as those talks hang in the balance, the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz is getting more intense. The UN Maritime Agency has made an urgent appeal to help thousands of sailors stranded there. This is the latest map of traffic in the Strait. Around 20,000 crew and 2,000 ships are stuck in the crucial waterway. Now, we've got correspondents in Islamabad, Tehran, and the White House. We're going to begin in the U.S. Capitol with Mike Hanna. So Donald Trump has been making a flurry of statements. Mike, what's he been saying?
Well, President Trump held a lengthy telephone interview in the course of the morning in which he covered a number of subjects, but specifically about the Iran war. He said that he didn't want to extend the ceasefire unless there was a deal in place. President Trump still views the ceasefire as expiring at midnight U.S. time this evening. He says no, he does not want to extend it unless the talks happen and unless there is a deal. President Trump also continued to say what he's been saying for days, if not weeks, that the U.S. has won this war. He says that Iran has no access to what President Trump calls its nuclear dust, by which it means, I suppose, the radioactive material or the enriched uranium that Iran possessed, what it says, for peaceful nuclear purposes. But President Trump says this has been destroyed by the U.S. bombers. So President Trump talking up a storm, certainly a lengthy telephone interview, also commenting about the U.S. financial situation, but most importantly, still not committing to extending a ceasefire and committing to extending a ceasefire, in fact saying that he will not unless a deal is in place.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. Mike Hanna there at the White House. We're going to go to Ali Hashim, who's talking to us there from Tehran. Ali, has there been any reaction so far to Donald Trump's latest comments? I appreciate, of course, they've just happened in the last couple of hours or so, but also, of course, Iran saying he's determined not to go to Islamabad unless the U.S. naval blockade is lifted. It won't do it if it's under threat. What else have you been hearing about that?
Well, indeed, there's no direct response to what President Trump said. However, we have a previous let me say, response, but it was before he spoke, but it's in the same context where Mohamed Bakr Kalibaf, who is supposed to be the lead negotiator, the Speaker of the Parliament, and one of the strong men here in Tehran, said yesterday that there's no possibility to go to the talks while on the siege, and also with Iran being asked to surrender. This is the same that President Pezeshkian said. The foreign ministry today also repeated that there's no one in Pakistan from Iran. No one has gone from the delegation. Add to that, the armed forces vowed to retaliate, and that in case there is going to be an attack on Iran, and they say they anticipate an attack on Iran, they are going to retaliate. Also, Kalibaf in his tweet yesterday said clearly, actually this morning, said clearly that Iran has some surprises that it's already prepared. The head of judiciary also anticipated an Israeli-American resumption of hostilities. So it's clear for the Iranians that as the time is inching towards the deadline, the ceasefire deadline, there's a possibility that they are going to face a war. Now, they are ready to go for negotiations, yet the main issue is about the blockade. And now we're hearing that the Iranian armed forces decided, in retaliation to the blockade, to completely close the Strait of Hormuz, completely, in front of everyone, even friends, even ships that are going to coordinate with Iran. And this, while it looks like an escalatory step, it could be a way out of this whole dilemma. Because when Iran closes the strait, in retaliation to the United States imposing the blockade. So we have two actions in front of each other. These two actions could help both sides get to the table while no one inching or getting back or giving any concessions.
Ali, thanks very much indeed for breaking that down for us. Ali Hashim there in Tehran. We're going to go to Osama bin Javed in the Pakistani capital. Now, Pakistan has had the spotlight on it around for its central role that it's been playing in these in mediating these negotiations. It's clearly a very important time for Pakistan, but given that we're so close to the deadline now, it's a very anxious time as well, I would have thought.
Well, I think Pakistan has just now, minutes before coming to this 1500 GMT, there's an announcement by the Pakistani Information Minister. This is unusual because Pakistan has maintained radio silence on what the status of these negotiations is. Ataullah Tarar, who's the Information Minister of Pakistan, has said essentially that they're still waiting for an official response from Iran. You've heard this play out on social media where the US president issues a statement, and you see a couple of statements in response from the Iranian side, but the Pakistanis are still waiting for an official response. He goes on to say that they're still in contact with the Iranians. Side. So negotiations are awaited, but contact has not been lost. This is coming off of the backdrop of the lengthy stay by the Pakistani Interior Minister as well as the military chief in Tehran, and they were expecting that the Iranians would be coming to Pakistan, or at least officially respond on what their intention is. So far, we've been hearing through back channels that there's been information that has been shared between the Pakistanis, the Americans, and the Iranians, and the American stance is that there is no pulling off of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz until they come to a deal. What that deal is going to look like is anybody's guess, because these sides are so poles apart on when it comes to what their respective positions are. And to discuss that further with us is a former diplomat of Pakistan who's been working in the Middle East, Mr. Jamil Khan. Thank you very much for taking the time. You say that this is not really a diplomacy, this is a tug of war. Now that quiet diplomacy has now come to the public sphere, How hopeful are you that this is actually going to proceed?
No, Pakistan is following the diplomacy and the path of diplomacy right from the very beginning. But what I was saying was that the dialogues, that the remarks which were being exchanged between the United States and particularly the President of the United States and the Iranian top officials and top leadership, that was a little different, and that's very unprecedented, not seen in the diplomacy as much. These kind of rhetoric and these kind of wordings which are being used, and the threats basically in the backdrop of the fact that the negotiation diplomacy is going on, and Pakistan is quite hopeful that they would be able to break through because of the path which Pakistan is following. And as you mentioned in your intro, the most significant effort which was made in the entire process was the Chief of Defense Forces, Sayyid Asim Munir, who stayed there in the war zone for about 3 days. And because of his previous positions in the military, particularly the intelligence position, the Chief of Intelligence in the military side and the ISI side. So both these the person to have the rapport with ranks and files of any country, particularly their defense forces and the intelligence agency. In this case, the Interior Minister, Mr. Naqvi, and the Defense Chief, both of them, they had a multi-layered and multi-dimensional diplomacy, both military diplomacy and the traditional diplomacy, due to which all these hiccups which were being created at that time, they were able to at least smoothen it out to this greater extent.
That's not the case now. You're hearing the Pakistani information minister coming out in public. You see the statements and the stances toughening, not softening up from either the Americans or the Iranians. So as the diplomat in the middle, as a mediator trying to bring them together, you say that there is still hope. What gives you that hope?
I would say there's a strong hope, and I have the following arguments for that, and the indicators on which I based my assessment and and of course some of my interactions which I have with my colleagues around in my previous role as an ambassador and as a citizen of Pakistan. I can very easily draw my conclusion that the preparation which you have already covered on your channel, and B, that the back channel diplomacy with multiple countries now involved in it. Even today, the Prime Minister was contacting all the stakeholders, including China, Russia, and other countries. So that is on one part. The second part is the indicators in front of me is that Donald Trump, his statements, although it's very difficult to decipher his statements, because last statement which I monitored was he's still feeling that the deal is going to be made, and the team led by J.D. Vance would be leaving the United States. They have not really said no to it. And second point is last time before the dialogue, Iranians, they had waited till the time the plane had taken off from Washington, and after that they announced their arrival. So this time around, my own feeling based on these indicators that if the plane takes off by midday, they are in the United States, and then perhaps we might as well hear some good news after about 3-4 hours. Yes, there are soaring points. Yes, blockade was the main problem. Previously, once the previous dialogue had taken place, blockade problem was almost resolved while the Chief of Defense Forces was there. But then again, once the cargo ship was seized by the United States Navy blockade, that became an accidental soaring point. I'm sure the Pakistani negotiators, they are trying to iron it out. To my understanding, if I base on my assessment on the last press conference which J.D. Vance had in Pakistan had conducted, about 5 and a half minutes press conference, in that he mentioned only one point, and that was enrichment. It is the later stages that now we're talking about the blockade. Now we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz, yes, definitely, Iran feels that it's a leverage with them, and that's first time they have realized that that could be so significant, that could be so powerful leverage that they could shake the entire world, and therefore they are still going on that. My understanding.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you very much for those insights. And there you have it. There is still in the diplomatic circles of Pakistan hope that this is going to transpire. I've been speaking to regional sources. There is a quad that is behind this process. Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, who are also hopeful that this is the off-ramp that Iran and the United States must take, because in the absence of that, as the D-Day clock has been set by the Pakistani Information Minister,